A 6-year-old girl knocked on the door of a biker clubhouse during a thunderstorm. Her hands were covered in blood. Her eyes were wild with terror. "Please," she begged. "They beat my mom and took her away." What happened next would destroy a cartel, save 2 lives, and transform a group of outlaws into the most unlikely heroes Arizona had ever seen. If this story touches your heart, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring more powerful stories to your screen. The storm hit Phoenix like a hammer from God. Rain pounded the desert streets, turning dust to mud, flooding intersections, sending people running for shelter. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, followed by thunder that shook windows and set off car alarms. It was the kind of night when sensible people stayed indoors. But Alice Martinez was not indoors. She was running, 6 years old, barefoot, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown soaked through with rain and something darker, something red. She had been running for 20 minutes, though she had no way of knowing that. Time had stopped meaning anything the moment the men kicked down their apartment door. She remembered her mother screaming, remembered being shoved into the closet. "Stay hidden, Mija. Don't come out no matter what. Don't make a sound." She remembered the sounds anyway, the hitting, the breaking, her mother crying, then begging, then going silent. She remembered waiting in that closet for what felt like forever, until she heard the door slam and engines drive away. Then she had crawled out and seen the blood. So much blood. But no mama. A neighbor had told her once about the building on Miller Road, the one with the motorcycles parked outside. "Bad men," the neighbor had said. "Stay away from there." But the men who took her mother were bad, and Alice didn't know where else to go. So she ran. The Hells Angels clubhouse sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The parking lot was full of Harleys, their chrome dulled by the rain. A single light burned above the door. Alice stopped at the gate, gasping for breath. Her feet were bleeding from broken glass and rough pavement. Her whole body shook, from cold, from fear, from exhaustion. She pushed through the gate and walked to the door. Inside the clubhouse, Jake Reaper Morrison was nursing a whiskey and trying not to think about the past. He was 54 years old, president of the Phoenix chapter for the last 12 years. His face was weathered leather, his beard streaked with grey, his arms covered in tattoos that told stories he rarely shared. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a knife fight in 1998. He had built this club into something, taken a group of outcasts and made them a family. They had a code, rules. They didn't deal in certain things, didn't hurt certain people. But tonight, the memories were bad. The anniversary always brought them back. 23 years ago today, his sister had died, beaten to death by a boyfriend while Jake was serving overseas. He hadn't been there to protect her. He was never there when it mattered. The knock on the door was so soft he almost missed it. "Someone get that!" he called out. Hammer, his sergeant-at-arms, moved to the door. He was 6'5" and built like his name suggested. He pulled the door open, looked down, and froze. "Reaper, you need to see this." Jake walked over and his heart stopped. A little girl stood in the doorway, soaking wet, shivering. Her nightgown was torn, her feet were bloody, and her hands were covered in blood. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Please help me. They beat my mom. They took her away. Please." Jake knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her level. Behind him, the clubhouse had gone silent. 30 men, hardened by years of violence and survival, staring at a terrified child. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Alice. Alice Martinez." "Okay, Alice. I'm Jake. Can you tell me what happened?" The story came out in fragments. Men breaking down the door, her mother hiding her in the closet, the sounds of violence, the blood, the empty apartment. "Do you know who these men were?" Jake asked. Alice shook her head, then stopped. "Wait, Mama said a name. Before they came. She was on the phone crying, she said Serpiente." The room went cold. Every biker in that clubhouse knew the name. Cartel Serpiente, the most vicious drug organization in the Southwest. They dealt in cocaine, meth, human trafficking. They killed without hesitation and tortured for sport. If they had Alice's mother, she was already dead, or worse. Jake stood up and turned to his brothers. Ghost, get me everything you can on Natalia Martinez. Address, workplace, family, everything. Hammer, call the Iron Wolves and Desert Rats. Tell them we need a meet, tonight. Jake. Doc, the club's medic, stepped forward. We're talking about the Serpient. This isn't some local crew we can intimidate. These people I know exactly what they are. Jake's voice was ice. I also know there's a 6-year-old girl standing in our doorway covered in her mother's blood. Are you telling me we're going to turn her away? Silence. Jake looked around the room, meeting every man's eyes. My sister died because no one helped her. Because everyone looked the other way. Because it was someone else's problem. His jaw tightened. I'm not looking away. Not tonight. Not ever again. He turned back to Alice and knelt down again. I need you to be brave for a little while longer, okay? We're going to find your mom, I promise. Alice looked at this terrifying stranger with his scars and tattoos and leather, and somehow she believed him. Okay, she whispered. Jake nodded to Doc. Get her cleaned up, find her dry clothes, and someone make her something to eat. As Doc led Alice away, Hammer approached Jake. Brother, you sure about this? Going to war with the Serpient. People are going to die. People already died. Jake watched Alice disappear into the back room. That little girl's childhood died the moment those men broke down her door. And if we don't act, her mother dies too. He grabbed his jacket. Get everyone ready, we ride in an hour. By midnight, the clubhouse had transformed into a war room. Maps covered the pool table. Photos of known Serpiente members were pinned to the walls. Ghost, the club's intelligence expert and a former army ranger, had compiled a dossier in record time. Natalia Martinez, 32 years old, single mother, works as a cleaning lady for a property management company. Ghost pointed to a photograph. She's beautiful. That's not why the Serpient took her. Then why? Jake asked. 3 weeks ago, she was cleaning a warehouse on the south side. According to police reports, she filed and then mysteriously withdrew. She witnessed something. Ghost put another photo on the table. A man in a police uniform. Detective Robert Hayes, dirty cop on the Serpient payroll for years. 3 weeks ago, he was executed in that warehouse, shot in the head by Eduardo El Oro Mendez, second in command of the Serpiente Arizona operation. She saw a cartel hit, Hammer muttered. And they found out. They found out because someone talked, probably someone in the police department. Ghost's expression was grim. She withdrew her statement, but it was too late. The Serpient don't leave witnesses. Jake studied the photos. Where would they take her? They have several properties. This one, Ghost circled a location on the map, is an abandoned meatpacking plant on the edge of town. It's where they do their interrogations. If she's still alive, that's where she'll be. How many men? At least 20, maybe more. Armed with automatic weapons. They've got lookouts, cameras, the works. This isn't a clubhouse raid, Jake. This is a military operation. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to the room. Who's coming? Every hand went up. The Alliance meeting happened at 2 a.m. in a neutral location, an abandoned gas station in the desert. 4 clubs answered the call. Iron Wolves, Desert Rats, Thunderdogs and Wildcards. 80 men in total, representing a combined century of experience in violence and survival. Jake explained the situation. Some presidents were skeptical, others were afraid. But when he showed them the photograph of Alice, cleaned up now, sleeping on a couch in the clubhouse, something shifted. That could be any of our daughters, said Marcus Bull Thompson, president of the Iron Wolves. Any of our nieces, any of our granddaughters. The Serpient think they own this state, added Rosa Delgado, the female president of the Wildcards. They think we're afraid of them. Maybe it's time we reminded them who really runs these streets. The vote was unanimous. By dawn, they had a plan. The attack would be coordinated. While the main force hit the meatpacking plant, smaller teams would strike Serpient drug labs, safe houses, and communication centers across the city. The goal was chaos, to stretch their resources so thin they couldn't mount a defense. Ghost had obtained blueprints of the plant. He identified entry points, guard positions, and likely locations where Natalia might be held. The assault team would consist of 30 men, hand-picked for their combat experience. Jake would lead them personally. What about the cops? Hammer asked. We have one friend in the department. Detective Maria Santos. She's been building a case against the Serpiente for years, but can't get anyone to cooperate. Jake pulled out his phone. I'm going to give her a gift. Everything we find, financial records, organizational charts, evidence of crimes, goes to her. This isn't just about rescue. It's about destroying the whole operation. At 4 a.m., Jake went to check on Alice. She was awake, sitting on the couch with a cup of hot chocolate, looking impossibly small in borrowed clothes that were 3 sizes too big. Hey, sweetheart. Can't sleep? Alice shook her head. I keep seeing the blood. Jake sat beside her. He understood that. He still saw blood too, after all these years. Alice, I need to ask you something important. When you were in the closet, did you hear anything else? Anything the men said? The little girl thought hard. One of them. He said something about the witness. He said El Oro wants her to talk first. Then he laughed. Her voice trembled. Why would he laugh? Jake's blood went cold. El Oro. Eduardo Mendez, the second most powerful man in the Serpiente organization. If he wanted Natalia to talk first, she was still alive. For now. You did great, Alice. Really great. Jake squeezed her hand. I'm going to go find your mom now. And when I bring her back, nobody's ever going to hurt either of you again. Promise? Jake looked at this brave, broken little girl and made a vow that would change both their lives. I promise. The assault began at 5:17 a.m. The first explosion took out the Serpiente's main drug lab on the south side. The second, moments later, destroyed their communications hub. By the time the third and fourth blasts echoed across the city, the cartel was in chaos. Jake's team approached the meatpacking plant through a drainage tunnel Ghost had discovered in the city's old sewer maps. They emerged in a basement storage room, wet and stinking but undetected. 30 men inside, Ghost whispered, checking his phone. 12 on patrol, 8 at the exits, 10 in the main room. Where's the woman? Thermal imaging shows a figure in the northeast corner. Basement level, probably the old freezer storage. Jake nodded. Hammer, take 5 men and secure the exits. Nobody gets out. Ghost, you're with me. Everyone else, create a diversion. I want chaos. The diversion came in the form of smoke grenades and flashbangs. The main floor of the plant erupted in confusion as bikers poured in from multiple directions, firing warning shots, creating panic. Jake and Ghost moved like shadows through the chaos. They found the stairs to the basement and descended into darkness. The old freezer was at the end of a long corridor. 2 guards stood outside, looking nervous at the sounds of combat above. Ghost took them down silently. Military training never faded. Jake kicked open the freezer door. What he saw nearly made him vomit. Natalia Martinez hung from a meat hook, her arms bound above her head. Her face was swollen beyond recognition. Her body was covered in cuts, burns, and bruises. Blood pooled beneath her bare feet. But she was breathing. Get her down, Jake ordered. Now. As Ghost worked on the restraints, Natalia's eyes fluttered open. She tried to speak, but her lips were too damaged. Your daughter is safe, Jake told her. Alice is safe. She came to us. She's the bravest little girl I've ever seen. Tears leaked from Natalia's swollen eyes. They carried her out through the tunnel as the battle raged above. Hammer's team had secured the exits, trapping the remaining Serpiente members inside, but they weren't done yet. A voice crackled over Ghost's radio. Jake, we've got a situation. Main floor. You need to see this. They emerged into a scene of controlled chaos. Serpiente members were zip-tied on the floor. Bikers were gathering evidence, boxes of documents, computers, phones, and in the center of the room, surrounded by iron wolves, stood a man in an expensive suit, his hands raised in surrender. Eduardo El Oro Mendez. Jake approached slowly. El Oro was younger than he expected, maybe 40, with slicked-back hair and cold eyes that showed no fear. You're making a mistake, El Oro said calmly. My organization will hunt you down. Every member of every club that participated tonight will die. Their families will die. There, Jake hit him so hard the cartel boss flew backward onto the concrete floor. That woman you tortured, she's a mother, a good person who never hurt anyone. Jake stood over him, his voice deadly quiet. And that little girl you made an orphan tonight. She's under my protection now. All of you are going to prison. And if anyone Anyone ever threatens her again, I will burn your entire world to the ground." El Oro looked up at Jake with pure hatred, but for the first time, there was fear in his eyes too. Outside, sirens wailed as police arrived. Detective Maria Santos was first on the scene, just as Jake had arranged. She surveyed the captured cartel members, the mountain of evidence, the rescued victim being loaded into an ambulance. "You just handed me the biggest case of my career," she said quietly. "Just make it stick, all of it." Jake watched the ambulance pull away, carrying Natalia to safety. "And keep their names out of it, the mother and daughter. They've been through enough. I'll do what I can." Santos hesitated. "Jake, what you did tonight, the bikers I know don't do this. Maybe you don't know the right bikers." He turned and walked to his motorcycle. They had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The weeks that followed were a storm of a different kind. Natalia Martinez spent 18 days in the hospital. Her injuries were severe: 3 broken ribs, a shattered cheekbone, internal bleeding, and wounds that would leave scars for life. But she was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. Alice never left her side. The bikers took turns standing guard outside her hospital room. Not because they expected the Serpiente to attack. Most of the cartel's Arizona leadership was in federal custody. But because they had made a promise, and Hell's Angels kept their promises. Jake visited every day. He brought flowers for Natalia and coloring books for Alice. He sat with them for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes just being present. The little girl who had knocked on his door covered in blood had carved a space in his heart that he hadn't known was empty. "Why are you doing this?" Natalia asked one afternoon, her voice still raspy from the damage to her throat. "You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Jake was quiet for a moment. "When I was 8 years old, my father used to beat me. Every night after he finished his bottle, he'd find a reason. My grades, my attitude, the way I looked at him." Natalia's eyes widened. Alice was asleep in a chair, clutching a stuffed bear one of the bikers had brought her. "I used to pray that someone would help us. My mom, my sister, me. I'd lie in bed and imagine someone breaking down the door and taking us away from him." Jake's jaw tightened. "Nobody ever came. My mom died when I was 12, my sister when I was 31, both of them because I couldn't protect them." He looked at Alice's sleeping face. "When your daughter knocked on my door, I saw myself. I saw every kid who ever begged for help and was ignored. And I decided that this time, someone was going to come. This time, someone was going to save them." Natalia reached out and took his hand. "You did. You saved us." "No, Alice saved you." She ran through a storm barefoot, covered in blood, to find help. 6 years old, and she was braver than most men I know. Jake squeezed her hand gently. "You raised an incredible kid, Natalia." Tears streamed down her bruised face. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to. Just get better. Take care of your daughter. Live." The federal case against the Serpiente was massive. Detective Santos had done her job brilliantly. The evidence collected during the raid, financial records, communication logs, organizational charts, and testimony from captured members, painted a complete picture of the cartel's operations. 47 members were indicted on charges ranging from drug trafficking to murder. Eduardo El Oro Mendez faced 17 counts, including ordering the execution of Detective Hayes and the kidnapping and torture of Natalia Martinez. But the prosecution needed more. They needed someone who could tie everything together, someone who had seen the inside of the operation. They needed Jake. "Absolutely not." Hammer slammed his fist on the table during the emergency church meeting. "You testify in federal court. You put a target on your back for life. The Serpiente has connections everywhere. Mexico, Central America. You'll be looking over your shoulder until the day you die." "I'm already looking over my shoulder," Jake replied calmly. "I've been looking over my shoulder for 40 years. What's a few more? This is different. This is cartel. They don't just kill you. They kill everyone you've ever loved. Then it's a good thing I don't have anyone left to lose." The room went silent. Ghost spoke up. "Actually, you do. That little girl and her mother. They're in witness protection now, but if you testify, the Serpiente will know you're connected to them. They'll find them eventually." Jake had considered this. For days, he had wrestled with the decision. But ultimately it came down to one simple truth. If I don't testify, El Oro walks. His lawyers are already spinning the raid as a biker gang turf war. Without someone to explain the evidence, to connect the dots, the jury won't understand what they're looking at. He stood up and looked around the room at his brothers. I watched Natalia hanging from a meat hook. I saw what they did to her. And I think about Alice, hiding in that closet, listening to her mother scream. His voice hardened. I am not going to let those animals walk free. I don't care what it costs me. The vote was reluctant, but unanimous. Jake would testify. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, Jake sat in the witness box, facing down defense attorneys who tried to paint him as a criminal, a liar, a man with ulterior motives. He answered every question calmly, methodically, never losing his temper. He described the raid in clinical detail. He explained the evidence. He identified El Oro as the man he had found in the warehouse, the man who had ordered Natalia's torture. On the 4th day, the defense made a mistake. Mr. Morrison, the lead attorney said with a sneer, isn't it true that you're the president of a criminal motorcycle gang? That you've been arrested multiple times? That you have a history of violence? I've been arrested, Jake admitted, never convicted. And yes, I have a history of violence. I was a Marine. I served 2 tours in Iraq. I've done things that keep me up at night. He paused. But I've never tortured a mother in front of her child. I've never sold drugs to kids. I've never murdered police officers for money. He looked directly at El Oro. I'm not a good man, but I'm not evil. There's a difference. The courtroom was silent. On the final day, Natalia testified via video link from witness protection. Her face was still healing. The bruises faded to yellow and green. But her voice was strong as she described what had been done to her. Alice did not testify. Jake had fought hard to keep her off the stand, and the prosecution agreed that her trauma was too fresh, her age too young. Instead, a child psychologist presented a report based on interviews with Alice, detailing what she had witnessed and how it had affected her. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Eduardo El Oro Mendez received 12 consecutive life sentences. 43 other Serpiente members received sentences ranging from 10 years to life. The cartel's Arizona operation was completely dismantled. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Jake. He pushed through them without comment, climbed on his motorcycle and rode away. That night he received a video call from an unknown number. When he answered, Alice's face filled the screen. "Hi, Jake." His heart nearly stopped. "Alice, how did you—" Natalia appeared beside her daughter. "Detective Santos arranged it. Just this once. We wanted to thank you. You didn't have to—" "Yes, we did." Natalia's eyes were wet. "We watched the trial. All of it. What you said. What you did. Jake, you gave up everything to make sure they went to prison. I gave up nothing. The club's still there. My brothers are still there. You know what I mean. You put yourself in danger. For us. For strangers." Jake looked at Alice's smiling face on the screen, and something inside him broke open. "You're not strangers. Not anymore." He paused, struggling to find words. "Alice, when you knocked on my door that night, you didn't just ask for help. You gave me something. A reason. A purpose. Something I haven't had in a very long time." Alice's smile widened. "Does that mean we're family?" Jake couldn't speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think it does." 6 months later, the paperwork was finalized. Jake Morrison became Alice Martinez's legal guardian. It had taken mountains of bureaucracy, background checks, home visits, and psychological evaluations. The social workers had been skeptical. A motorcycle club president adopting a traumatized child. But Jake had passed every test. The clubhouse had been deemed safe. His brothers had submitted character references that made him sound like a saint. And Alice had been clear from the beginning. When asked who she wanted to live with, she had pointed at Jake's photograph without hesitation. "Him. He saved my mommy. He saved me." Natalia, still in witness protection but healthy now, had given her blessing. The relationship between her and Jake had evolved into something neither expected, not romance, but a deep bond forged in shared trauma and mutual respect. She loves you, Natalia told him during one of their video calls. And I know you'll protect her. You already have. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she's safe. I know you will. The adoption ceremony was small. Just Jake, Alice, a judge, and 30 Hell's Angels who insisted on attending despite the judge's concerns. When it was official, Alice threw herself into Jake's arms. I have a daddy again, she whispered. Jake held her tight, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel broken. 1 year later, the Sanctuary Project launched. It had started as an idea during Jake's testimony, a way to use the skills and networks of motorcycle clubs to help law enforcement rescue children in danger. Detective Santos had championed the concept, working with federal agencies to create a formal partnership. The program paired trained bikers with law enforcement in cases involving missing children, human trafficking, and domestic abuse. They provided manpower, intimidation factor, and something the police often lacked: connections to communities that distrusted authority. In its first year, the Sanctuary Project helped rescue 37 children across 12 states. Jake stood at the podium during the program's anniversary celebration, looking out at an audience of bikers, cops, social workers, and politicians. Alice sat in the front row, now 7 years old, wearing a tiny leather jacket one of the brothers had custom-made for her. A year ago, I was asked why a motorcycle club would want to help save children, Jake began. People assumed we had ulterior motives, that we wanted publicity or money, or to clean up our image. He paused. The truth is simpler than that. Every single one of us knows what it's like to be afraid, to feel alone, to think that nobody cares what happens to you. He looked at Alice, and every single one of us knows what it's like when someone finally shows up, when someone says, I see you, I'm going to help. He stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. A little girl knocked on my door during a storm. She was covered in blood and terrified. She could have run anywhere, but she came to us because somehow she knew that we would help. His voice cracked. That little girl is my daughter now, and every day she reminds me why we do this, not for glory, not for recognition, but because every child deserves someone who will show up for them. Every child deserves to feel safe. The audience erupted in applause. After the ceremony, Jake found Alice talking to a small boy near the refreshment table. The boy was maybe 5 years old, with dark hair and eyes that looked too old for his face. Daddy! Alice ran over, pulling the boy with her. This is Michael. His big sister is missing. He's scared. Jake knelt down to Michael's level. Hey, buddy, can you tell me what happened? The boy's story came out in fragments. His sister, 13 years old, had disappeared a week ago. The police were investigating, but there were no leads. His parents were falling apart. Jake looked at Alice, his daughter, his redemption. Alice, why don't you take Michael to get some cookies? I need to make some phone calls. Alice nodded solemnly, understanding more than a 7-year-old should. She took Michael's hand and led him away. Jake pulled out his phone and called Ghost. I need everything you can find on a missing girl, 13 years old, disappeared a week ago. He paused. And call the brothers. We've got work to do. That night, as Alice slept in her room at the clubhouse, decorated with motorcycle posters and stuffed animals, Jake sat on the porch, watching the stars. His phone buzzed. A text from Natalia, who had finally emerged from witness protection and was rebuilding her life in a new city. Saw your speech. You were amazing. Alice is so proud of her daddy. Jake smiled. His daddy. After everything, the violence, the loss, the years of believing he was beyond redemption, he had become someone's father. He typed back, I'm proud of her. She's the one who taught me how to be brave. A motorcycle rumbled in the distance. Then another. His brothers, returning from their evening ride. Jake stood up and walked toward them. There was a little girl missing, a family torn apart by fear, another storm coming. But this time, when someone knocked on the door asking for help, there would be an answer. There would always be an answer, because that's what family does. They show up, they fight, they protect, and sometimes, against all odds, they save each other. 2 years later, Michael's sister was found safe, rescued during a Sanctuary Project operation in Nevada. Michael himself would grow up to become a social worker, dedicating his life to helping other missing children. Alice graduated high school with honors. She studied criminal justice in college, then joined the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit. On her desk sat a framed photograph, a 6-year-old girl in a too-big leather jacket, standing between 30 Hells Angels who had become her family. And Jake Reaper Morrison, the man who had spent decades believing he couldn't save anyone, finally understood the truth. Sometimes the broken ones are the best at putting others back together. Sometimes the outlaws become the heroes. And sometimes a little girl knocking on your door in a thunderstorm isn't just asking for help. She's offering you redemption, the end